All right, so right now we're gonna do 5 tips for the knife maker. These are 5 very basic but super helpful tips. First one we're gonna do is I'm gonna wrap up the blade. So this is something we do pretty much when we're working on the handle or we're doing something back here where we don't want to scratch up the blade, or we're gonna leave it for a while and we don't want to like rust or anything on there. What I do is I take some magazine paper. This Racer's Mag really works well because it's thicker paper. I get a lot of WD-40 on there. I basically coat the whole entire blade in WD-40. This will help prevent it from rusting. The last thing you want to do is do all this work and then you unravel this and you have like pitting everywhere. So I take the magazine paper. I do a crease like that. I also do this very differently than Sam. Sam's wrong.
Fuck you.
So I crease it, I put the edge in there, and I wrap it tightly. When it starts wrapping too much in the ricasso or too far, you can always fold this back. And I keep wrapping it like that. You can use 2 sheets if you've got a longer blade. This is where Sam and I differ. When I get to the tip, I fold this area back to
so
create.
Far, exactly the same process.
It's not the same.
It's exactly the same.
It's not the same. So I create this like...
You create a nub so you don't break the tip.
Yes. Electrical tape because it's stretchy and it cinches things pretty tight. And I just go all the way down, make sure it's tight all the way. When I get to the heel, I do this diagonal like wrap around. Go back over, and then cut, flop. So now, if I'm doing something on the tang or handle or whatever, this is protected. If you slip with this, it won't cut you, probably. And hopefully when you take this back off, it's not gonna be completely rusted and I don't know. Next tip.
All right, tip number 2, fuckers. We're gonna tape the edge. I don't know where Don learned this, but I learned it from Don. And we do this to protect ourselves while we're working on the tang usually. Take a long piece of tape, stick it on the edge like that, with about 50% of it hanging off, like so, at least the way I do it. I just let it hang, let gravity kind of pull it. Stick it to the bottom there.
Yep.
And then what I do is I just wrap it around, like so. Ain't gotta be perfect. And then take some scissors. I usually like make sure I know where the blade is and cut below that. Let it drop off, throw this in the trash.
No!
All right, so we do this anytime we need to protect ourselves from the blade. Don will do this when he does the spine and choil. I'll do this when I shell out the tang or flatten the tang, just because depending on what we're doing, if it catches, especially on our horizontal disc, it could catch and cut the poop out of you. So this is just an extra layer between you and a relatively sharp blade. It's not completely finished, but
It'll cut the living fuck.
it'll cut the living fuck out of you, and it'll cut the living fuck out of you, and it's kind of sharp because we've already tested it on potatoes. So yeah, it's just a good way to kind of save yourself from a horrible injury, or even a minor slip up, like if Don's doing the spine and it catches on him a little bit, it doesn't lop one of his fingers off.
Yep, which I've done.
It seems simple and dumb and not worth explaining, but there we go. Woo!
It saved me a bunch of times, actually.
Yeah, it saved me a couple of times too. And it's just peace of mind too. It helps you focus.
That's sharp, right? I'm just gonna find scissors. Give me a second. ill-prepared, unorganized shop with no system of tool placement. And we're doing a video trying to help other knife makers.
I know. Pretty embarrassing.
Yeah.
For you.
This tip is actually for doing the tip of the knife itself. So on a lot of other videos, you'll probably see like it's got a blunt tip or it's got this little nub right here. And you're probably just like, what in the fuck is that there for? The reason why I do this blunt tip or this little nub right here is because when you're grinding, it is very easy to overheat just the tip when you're doing like the bevel or whatever, especially since we don't have variable speed. This is always running full speed, and when you're going higher grit belts, heat builds up much faster. So instead of trying to fight the grinder and you have to regrind the tip over and over, and then your chef's knife turns into a sentoku, you can leave this tip on here, this blunt tip, and then grind that at the very end. Now that the blade is almost done, it's been sanded and it's almost ready for the handle and finishing touches, I can grind this off. We won't have to touch this up again after that, and then the geometry will be where I want it, and it's not going to be all fucked up because I burnt the tip.
What part of the process do you do this, Don?
Close to the end.
Right.
Like before I put on the handle, of course, but like this blade's been sanded to 600 grit. It's like fairly clean.
Yeah.
So the only things after this would be like the final touches.
Okay.
So let me just do that really quick. So the trick with doing this part is when I'm grinding, I kind of jab at it really quick with light pressure, and then I rock it back. So the very, very tip gets almost no pressure and like no time on the grinder. So I just go like plop like that, and then I go back to the more of the bulk back here. So same thing as like when you're doing like the edge of the knife, you want to be quicker about it. With the tip, if I stick on there for like half a second too long, I've burnt it. So I'm just gonna grind them right now. You see the rhythm that I do? I'm just gonna go really quick push, rock it back, dip. Really quick push, rock it back, dip. And then it'll get close enough to here.
Water first, droplet. You live?
Yep.
Tip number
4.
4. So anyway, let's assume that you're hand sanding your knife, right?
Yes.
And you got a clean side, super sweet, finished, pretty side, right?
Yes.
You need to protect it while you do the other side of the blade, right?
Why?
So it doesn't get scratched, because usually your fixture has a bunch of crap on it. It has tape on it, but like you can see that the tape is uneven, and there's steel showing, and there's all sorts of detritus and garbage on there that you don't want to have mess up your nice finish. So
Oh.
you use a little bit of painter's tape to protect the side you just finished. First,
I'm jumping ahead of things right now.
you take some WD-40, because you want to protect your finished side from moisture, and you give it a nice coating. And now what I do, this is a pro tip, because Lord knows I'm a pro, is you take a dry piece of paper towel and you just give it a once over again, so it's not too thick with WD-40, because the tape won't stick otherwise. Then you take some painter's tape that I definitely haven't unraveled like 6 times at this point, And here's what I do. I'll tell you a little story real quick. We worked on a Nakiri once that was so thin that variations in the tape would fuck with the finish on the other side because the steel would flex so much. So what I do to mitigate that, especially toward the edge, is I do a V pattern on a knife like this, or do the edge and then do the spine, so that, or vice versa.
Ooh, what is a V pattern? I'm learning something here.
So I do that, and then for the edge, I do its own little side, right? So the blade is mostly covered, but the edge has a nice even amount of tape so that there's no variation, so that it doesn't flex when you're sanding on the other side and you're applying pressure. And then I just fill in the gaps, because in the middle here, it's nice and thick and it won't flex so much that it'll change your geometry. Then you flip that fucker over like so, and you have a protected clean side and a workable opposite side, and you can start your sanding on this side.
Thank you, Sam.
Does that work?
Yes.
Okay. And then you put this on here.
No!
And then you kick the trash can over.
No, Sam's not. No.
And then you riot.
Okay, so for our last tip, when did we do the last when did we do the...
Definitely hasn't been like a month since we filmed.
We filmed the last tip like a month ago, and then I, like a fucking dumbass, deleted it on accident.
Yeah.
So, for the last tip, again, this one is basically protecting the blade while you're grinding the handle. So I used to have a problem where I would try to tape all this up, I would shape the handle, but like, if you tape up in here, and then you grind like the spine and down here, that tape's coming off, and it's gonna unravel, and then you get like all this abrasive dust in there, and then it just scratches everything up. And of course, this is like you can't refinish this area. You can refinish in front of the blade, like in front of the plunge, but you can't refinish right at this transition area where the handle glues up. So I tried like tape, I tried wrapping it, I tried just being very careful. None of those were very effective. Now, this is something that I just like decided one day that would be a good idea, and it's worked ever since. I just use nail polish, and I just make it look pretty. Give it a nice coat all the way up into the tape. Like that. And then, doesn't hurt to put on the spine either. Like, you could just use acetone and take all this off after. I use the Insta Dry stuff. I'm not sponsored or anything. And then same thing here, just coat up in the ricasso area. This way when I'm grinding, there's nothing to unravel, there's nothing to like, you can't get dust under the nail polish and stuff like that. So I could just grind and sand this handle like normal, and then once it's done, just clean off the nail polish, and then hopefully it's good. I don't think there's not much. It's like
5 tips.
Okay. And those are the 5 tips. Like 2 months later.
Yeah.
Yep.
Hold the subscribe button down and punch it in its asshole.
No. Do we have an outro?
Oh,
No.
of course not.
That's it.